All right, guys. So now we're going to look at Homesick. And again, I'm going to give you a second. Go ahead and pause the video if you need to so that you can go through and read it once without making any marks. And then once you've done that, we're going to go through and we're going to make pencil marks and we're going to kind of make observations. And I'm just using this pen to make my pencil marks. It's just like a regular black ink pen. And I'm going to start with the title because sometimes the title can give us clues. And here we see that like the poem is called Homesick. So we're already starting with sort of like a connection to emotion. And typically homesickness is a sense of longing for the comfort of home, which is a place where you belong and you feel acceptance, right? And your feeling comfort. So I'm sort of expecting some of that to be some of the like major themes in the story or the poem, since that's the title. And I know this here starts with when. So we're talking about time. So when we love, when we tell ourselves we do. So here there's some interesting repetition that's kind of worth mentioning. I like here this love piece. So that's, again, that kind of like connection to family. That can be romantic. It can be familial. It can be friendship. That can be a lot of different kinds of pieces. It doesn't have to be romantic love. And when we tell ourselves that we do, so that when we're mature enough to kind of recognize it, when we have been in love long enough to recognize it, we are pining for first love. And so like I think about like the kind of intensity of feelings when you first fall in love, and pining is a word that means longing. So when you're longing for those feelings of like being in love for the very first time, when we rearrange the rooms we end up living in. So we like a reestablish, reset, restart the rooms we end up living in. So again, this idea of like home and sort of that place where we belong. We are looking for first light. And so that can certainly be like literal light. Or it can connect back to this idea of like, because this first light and first love is a really interesting connection. So it could be this like kind of connection between the first light of the day and also like this connection of like feeling first love and sort of the intensity of that sort of moment. So again, the repetition here seems pretty important. The arrangement of life. So it's not just furniture, right? But like also we're kind of looking at this like bigger picture. That time before we knew to call it light. So again, we're here speaking of this idea of like maturity and sort of like recognizing the changes in life. And so, hold on. I'm recording, just so you know. And this connection to time is going to connect to that idea of like when. So the whole stanza is about time. And so then we have a pause, like those structural breaks are pauses. And so like when we are longing for that time when we are in love, and then we shift down to or. So this is a new topic, talk of music. And I do think that music can be kind of universal. It's a language all on its own, and it can be kind of universal. But there's that repetition when we say we cannot talk of it, but play again, C major, A flat minor. I actually think those are like highs and lows. My music people can kind of correct me, but C major tends to be kind of happy, and I think A flat minor tends to be kind of sad. So we're straining, which is similar to that idea of like the searching or the looking that they were doing in the last stanza. Here, though, that we're looking for sound. So this whole piece is connecting to this idea of music as a form of communication beyond language, right? So we're looking for what we heard once. So again, that first love, first sound, that kind of repetition, and sort of the newness of that experience, that excitement, and lost chords, wordless languages. So things we have lost connection to in our memories or in our feelings. And so then we shift to what country. And so again, here we're talking about identity. And we come here to questions. I see 4 questions. So in this stanza, there's an element of sort of uncertainty. And again, that connects to that idea of kind of like searching for, like, what are we searching for? What are we looking for? What do we want? And so what country do we come from speaks to that kind of a national identity. Is it this one? So like maybe there has been like moving or relocation. This one where the sun burns. So maybe someplace like that's a little bit more tropical when we have night. So that's just to me like we're talking about like opposite sides of the world, right? That things don't quite match up anymore, and the moon chills elsewhere possible. So here we were looking for homesickness and sort of belonging and love, and here we're talking about it in music, and here we're talking about it in sort of like the place where we are. And then again, we sort of get another like question. Why is our love imperfect? So that kind of connects to those ideas of relationships, right? Like that kind of, I think all relationships are kind of sometimes imperfect. So we have this, again, connection to the second stanza. Music is only an echo of itself. And I actually think that's a really pretty line, because it speaks to this idea of like an echo or like a reverberation of initial experiences, right? So like I think about, the first time you go somewhere or experience something or eat something or drink something, and the intensity of that first experience, and how you can't always recreate that when you have it a second or third or fourth or fifth or sixth or whatever time. And so you just sort of feel a little bit lost. And so it's an echo of itself rather than the experience itself. And the light wrong is a connection back to that first stanza. So this, again, searching for something lost. And we scratch in dust with sticks. Makes me think of children dying of some homesickness. So we're looking for this like belonging. For when and where and what we were. So I actually really like this poem. I think it's really pretty. It's really unique. So when we look at our different colors and we're doing our annotations, I would definitely do language observations around the idea of belonging. I also really like the directional words. So like when and what and where. So like all these kind of like directional words I think is really interesting. Why? So all the questions that are not really questions, right? So those kind of pieces, and we find that kind of belonging through music, through location, through relationships, right? And sort of this idea of like the kind of idleness of wanting to belong, and that homesickness. The structural pieces are kind of interesting, and then we have again various stanzas, various stanza lengths. So the first stanza is 6 lines, and then it shifts down to 5 lines, and then it shifts to 4, 3, 3. So there actually is sort of like this kind of like diminishing or simplifying that sort of happens over the course of the poem. Textual features, I would definitely talk about repetition, because we have a lot of repetition that we sort of identified. I would probably talk about the use of commas. I would probably talk about rhetorical questions. We're almost done here, guys. So rhetorical questions that we saw kind of here. I even think you could talk about the imagery down here. It's a really interesting rhetorical feature too, or language feature too. And then point of view is first person. We know that because of we, ourselves. And it is people who are, you know, have moved, who are not like where their original country is, and are sort of searching for things. So the last thing I would just do before we were done here, oh, and I just dropped my pen, so you'll have to forgive me for using a colored pen this time. When we talk about themes, I would talk about belonging. I would talk about identity. And I would, I would talk about the concept of home and sort of like belonging in home. So that's our poem.